Welcome, my friends. So it's as fate or chance, you determine which, would have it, it's 6 o'clock for episode 66. We're going to be talking about the devil, Luciferianism, and Nefarianism, and the darkness, and yeah, I don't know. I just, thought let the numbers guide me, and so 66. What could I do? That could be a laugh. So I think I'm going to talk about just different sides of the, like figuratively the devil, or like what that can mean, and then what it can mean in terms of like, say, just the whole what do you call moral relativism thing of like, oh, that's just their religion, because there are people who say, yeah, I'm a Satanist. That's just my religion. It's the same as any religion. Spoiler alert, I think that kind of doesn't make much sense. And then also the possibility that there are like elites engaged in like satanic cults, which some people believe, and you might think that's just totally crazy people, but I've dug into it enough to know that there's some reasons why people would believe it. I haven't dug into it enough to know whether it is like legitimate. But like I've seen videos of people who look very genuine saying like what happened to them, and they're on TV. Like there's some 60 Minutes thing, for example, of this British teenager talking about what happened to her, and that her grandma used to take her to these black mass things where there'd be all this crazy stuff going on and killing babies and stuff. And she said that that's this kind of dark side to like certain very powerful families or whatever, and that's like they have their own kind of religion thing based upon that kind of domination thing. Now you might be thinking, no way, Jose. But then I'd be like, hey, that's a bit, come on, xenophobic. Let's keep it above the belt here. No, but you might be thinking like, that's crazy. But then, yeah, maybe. But are you certain? I'm not certain either way. I don't know enough. Do you know enough? Probably not. I mean, but yeah. And then, also the possibility that, so that's, they can believe in that, but doesn't mean the devil is real. People can be Christian, doesn't mean God's real. But then there's also the possibility that there is this like devil. That could be from the whole, traditional thing of like, oh, like religion. You think like there actually just is this negative force, and then you might wonder, is that in service to God? Like it's part of this movie thing, or like a video game. We need a bad guy to have the story. It's all good. Ultimately, everyone's safe. The soul cannot be destroyed. Everyone's fine. But we go through this experience of suffering, and that's how we grow spiritually. And we need someone to hold that polarity, the negative polarity, and that there's just some servant of God who's willing to do that. Or is it that there's a servant of God who's gone rogue? And this could be the same thing, but like maybe they're subconsciously helping God, not really aware, but like, but they think, they're like, I'm just going to take it for myself, create my own kingdom. Or is it like an alien? Like some people think that, aliens run the planet, and that it's like, there's a prince, like reptilian prince for each planet. And there's this the galaxy, half of the galaxy is controlled by some political enterprise, which is, nefarious and dark. And that there'll be like a prince, Prince Reptile for Earth, and that's the devil, like that, who we call the devil. Who knows? Again, I mean, that seems very outlandish, but life is very outlandish, and so I think actually the most logical, scientific, reasonable, I use scientific just to, well, I think that's fair, but also I use that because often that's the buzzword which would help people know what I mean, which is, grounded, clear thinking, not easily swayed or fooled or anything. Clear-headed, logical way to look at things. In general, like, just don't jump to conclusions. And some things we think, oh yeah, but that's ridiculous. So it's okay to, I'm not jumping to conclusions because it's just objectively crazy. But the thing is, when you see other people jumping to conclusions, they don't notice that they've skipped a step. They think, no, it's just objectively crazy, or it's just objectively there's no argument here. And you're like, no, you've missed a step. You're making an assumption. So I would invite you to be aware, if this is your kind of frame of mind, that actually, like, is the Earth run by some reptile prince, reptilian humanoid kind of like dude, he's probably got some crazy helmet and like a scepter and, an orb of power or something, part of some galactic, darkness. Well, I don't know about you, but my research on that is a bit scant, for one thing, I don't have a spaceship. I'm unable to travel to distant star systems to check. So if you do have a spaceship and you have been doing this, please let me know in the comments. But like, I think this would be a situation where like we really have no idea. And, you can't, it's not like you should spend your whole life thinking about, oh my God, is there a reptile prince running the world? But it's the kind of thing where if you go and assume like, oh, I definitely know that that's not true, then you're running the risk that when something more relevant comes up, like, oh, my government wants to do this, or, oh, my family member is suggesting this thing, or whatever it is, that you might also skip a step then and make assumptions. So I think, yeah, I would say on this thing, we really don't know. But anyway, but it's, interesting to think about. Why not? So, and then there's also like, the kind of more, I guess I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, but okay, so let's get into the sort of figurative or mythological side of like the devil or, Lucifer or whatever. And people talk about like Luciferianism and then, what's the other one? I was just thinking of it. What is it? There's Lucifer and there's I can't remember. It'll come to me. But there's this other one which is meant to be another side of the devil. I mean, I think Paul Chek, if you know that guy, Chek, Chek. He's this health and fitness kind of dude, but he also does a bunch of things about like more mystical kind of out there stuff, or in there stuff, as the case may be. And there's something where he was talking about with someone about like maybe like some Iranian guy or Persian guy or something, about like the two sides of like the devil and how it's all misunderstood and that it's not like a bad thing. And I think they were saying it's not a bad thing. It's just something that's like a necessary part of life. But it was a bit confusing because I was like, are they saying it's okay to like be, doing terrible things and, conquering people and dominating people? Or is it that their idea of what the devil or Lucifer, etc., stands for is actually not that dark stuff, is it? But I think they would have mentioned that. So anyway, whatever, you could check that out if you want to look at that up, even though that's a bit vague. But yeah, I think like the mythological side, like there's Lucifer means the light bringer, I think, the bringer of light, and it was the idea is right. It's like God's right hand man, the highest angel. Who is, really aware and all that and powerful, but then kind of thought, and I might be butchering this, but I'm going to tell you, this is just food for thought, fun stuff to think about, things you might not have heard about before, and I'm just going to put it into a package for you. Like, there's not really meant to be any conclusion to this. I'm not saying the devil's real or anything. This is just, hey, think about this. Why not? We're in space. Let's have some fun. Let's think about stuff. But as I understand it, yeah, Lucifer, so that was the highest angel. And then he fell and took a bunch of other angels down with him, like, yeah, come with me. And there was a schism in heaven, but where basically he represents the intellect, unbridled intellect. So when you think, all that I know is all that there is to know, when you don't have the intellectual humility to admit your own ignorance, or to be aware of your own unawareness, to know your own ignorance. So, and, you might say like, it makes no sense. The idea that there's God in heaven, that's crazy. Just some guy up in the clouds. We know that there's space and stuff now. That's so stupid. All right, case closed, says, some 14-year-old. And then it's like, well, actually, do you understand, physics? and like the current understandings of what physics is showing? And have you read, how much philosophy have you read? How much of the great thinkers of the past are you aware of? How many psychedelic medicines have you taken? How much meditation have you done? All these kinds of things where they can lead you to go, oh, wait a minute. Oh, God could exist. There's a way that God could exist and that it wouldn't be contradictory with what we know about the solar system and stuff. God doesn't need to be in the clouds in heaven with a big beard. It could be like, for example, God is the whole universe. Oh, and, this is kind of like happening within God's imagination or something. And like the universe, what's it expanding into? Or if it's the multiverse, then like, what is in between these multiverses? Isn't that more universe? So then it's just one big super universe, which is the same thing. It's just the universe. And what is this sitting in? And where did it come from? And why did it happen at that exact time whenever it began? Why didn't it begin 15 minutes earlier, as we would measure it in terms of sun revolutions? Like, why was it just then? Like, what the hell? What's going on here? There's all these things where you go, oh, actually, ants know nothing about us as far as we know. And so what do we know about the cosmos, really? So, okay. And then, so that would be an example, I think, of that Luciferian impulse to kind of be like, oh, I know everything. And then you could think that you're right, but actually, the funny thing is, it seems like that kind of is the root of all evil, is the mind, the human mind. But if we go a bit more specific there, it's like the mind, the inability to question your mind. When consciousness is totally just swept up in belief with the mind, that's kind of the main problem all over the world, like, Putin and Zelensky or whatever, they've got their different ways of looking at the situation. I'm sure they both think they're doing the right thing. I don't think, or Hitler or like, anyone, I don't think they're like, oh, I'm going to go do some bad things. And even if they think it is bad, some people are like, yeah, I'm just going to destroy stuff, kill people and cause carnage. They think it's a good idea to do that. They think that that's going to improve their world. So it's still a good philosophy grounded in improvement and in betterment, So it's just a misunderstood one. They've just become detached from perspective. But nonetheless, so yeah, what else? So that, there's got the archetypal angel and devil on your shoulder, the voice of conscience and, temptation. So I guess the devil can be that represent, when the temptation to do what we know is wrong, or maybe to lie to ourselves, to repress awareness, and to kind of stray from balance and from integrity. And of course, just evil, just doing bad things, like the dark side. And I think, it's very important if you want to be light that you can acknowledge your dark side, And it's a real mystery because it's kind of like the shadow, what the light doesn't see, the shadow, And Jung talked about the shadow, like the parts of ourself we don't want to look at and that just we act out. Which brings up one thing he said is, what is it, like anything which is not brought into awareness will be played out in the world as fate, something like that. It's pretty cool. But yeah, so we, like I kind of wonder sometimes, like, oh, in what ways, what element, what part, what kind of darkness do I have which I'm not aware of right now? Or, somehow some part of me, it's like, the CIA compartmentalizing stuff, and then, soon enough, there's secret bureaus, and then there's a secret bureau within that, and then they link with up, some other, the Chinese or something, and there's some other thing going on. And it gets to the point where who knows what's going on, Sometimes wonder if, in the psyche, there could be, you make a deal to, you just kind of notice something, but you notice it not very clearly, and you just kind of turn away. So you saw it in peripheral awareness, but you distracted yourself. And then due to the nature of memory being kind of ephemeral, it kind of fades away, and you kind of just a little feeling that something was there, but you don't really remember it properly. And then, once you've done that, then maybe that could set off a cascade where things just, or maybe, get repressed or hidden, within your mind, and that there could be things that you're not aware of. And, it does seem to be a thing, like repressing, people when they have trauma, they often repress it, I believe. So like say children, if they can't deal with the emotions, they will just push it away, block it off, So, and I believe this, certain intelligence agencies, like I think the CIA may have been investigating, like kind of exploring, like using trauma to create, again, allegedly, I don't know, to create, what do you call that? Not like splinters or like, I can't remember the word for it, but kind of like where you could have an alter ego, an alternate personality where someone is able to, you give them the code word and then they split you're able to basically splinter the psyche in some way, and then they would be, when they do things in one mode, they would be then unaware of it when you bring them back to the other mode. So they could kind of do horrendous things at your command, allegedly. Who knows? Whatever. But yeah, the devil. So mythological. That's kind of that, I guess. Darkness and doing dark things, and even being selfish in small ways. That's all one little branch of the big tree of the darkness. And I think you might think it's small, but it's like anything at all which isn't coming from balance and love. Where is it coming from? It's coming from this dream state in which we're like the ego, where you're detached from love, and from real pure love. You might still feel love, maybe for kind of in a more what could you call that? What's the term? Not mercantile, but transactional kind of sense. I'll love you if you love me. This kind of thing. Using people or having expectations, but anyway, but that kind of pure, kind of spirit. It's very easy to lose that if you just, you get lost in your thoughts. And so, even any selfish little thing, or like, oh, I'm going to be a bit lazy, like, oh, I might just do the dishes later, or whatever, then that could be, well, where did that voice come from? That's kind of the voice of the devil. It's like, even though it's, innocuous enough, it's not too crazy. That same voice, that source that you're giving a little power and influence over you there, that will 100% try and mess with you really seriously at some point in time. Like, oh, I think we should end this relationship. Or, oh, I think I should say, fuck you to that guy, and it'd be like, these are horrendous self-sabotaging ideas. No, don't do that. It's like, oh, how did I let that thing grow in me? It's like, well, maybe through tiny decisions where you did something which was out of balance and which you knew wasn't right, but you have the capacity to lie to yourself. And so you're like, oh yeah, okay. And you thought it was a good idea to do that, which is interesting. It's like awareness is kind of the cure. It's like when you realize, the cure to all this is realizing actually it isn't good for you to lie to yourself. You lie to yourself because you think you're getting more than you're giving, and you're being selfish there. But actually you're not. You're actually losing more than you're getting. But you are not aware of that. And then if you lie to yourself enough, you hinder and impair your awareness. And so it can be reinforcing, where you could become less and less aware of the real nature of such exchanges in your mind. And but to become more aware of it and just be like, then eventually I think, the highest form of selfishness, where you're like, oh, I'm just going to really do what's best for me. Never mind everyone else. I'm just going to focus on me. Make me the happiest that I possibly can be. Well, you can't be any happier than awake. And to be awake, you need to be, to be awake, you need to become aware of your mind and question your mind, and not just take what it's saying for granted, and understand that you are not your mind. You're not the voice in your head. You are the listener or the watcher, whatever you want to call it. Again, these are just words. And in English, I don't know, what do you say? I don't even know what you call it in another language, but like la personne qui regarde, or dina, egg, feich, or whatever. These are other words, but they all point at the same thing, right? So the thing is not the word. They're different, right? These are just 3 different signposts I've given you. But who we are, it's not words. It's beyond words, right? But when to wake up and thus to be as happy as you can be. If you're really trying to be a professional, selfish person, okay, then you need to wake up, and to do that, inevitably you need to become aware of your mind and disidentify from your mind, and see it like as your beautiful, humble servant. It's like the mind is the perfect servant, but a lousy master, as they say. And then when you do that, you realize, okay, wait, so I'm not the mind. I'm just this, basically, you could say consciousness, awareness, presence, being, whatever, the universe, man. And then you're like, oh, wait, okay, I'm like, if you go into it deeply enough, reading and philosophy can help with this, or psychedelic, ceremonies or whatever. And then, you can, when you're sober, you can remember that and kind of have perspective and see what's going on. Just like if you have a picture of something and you zoom in really far, you can see details that you hadn't noticed. And then if you look at the real thing again, you'll be able to pick out those details now. Because before you weren't quite sure what it was, but then use your phone or whatever or binoculars, and you zoom in, you can see it. And then with your naked eye, again, now you can interpret it. I see what that is. So in a similar way, some of these experiences can then be integrated, where in just your normal resting awareness, you can be more aware of things. So as you become aware, you realize like, oh, I'm like a little branch on the tree of life. Jamie, this little branch, but I'm also, you could say I'm Jamie right now, but I'm also the whole sum of all Jamies, through time or whatever you could say. But let's just say Jamie, and then, but I'm also, Maglu, the Maglu family, or I'm my family, If you take away me and everyone in my family, then there is no family. If you take away the people just like me, so the family is not separate from us, right? We are the family. And so, and then also, say, for me, it'd be Ireland or Australia, this is where I come from. And if you take away all the people like me who come from these places, then suddenly, there's just the land. That's not what we really mean when we mean the country. We mean the people also. And so, we are the country. We are the people. And then, we are humanity. We are animals. We are life. We are Earth. We are solar system. We are the cosmos, or galaxy. The Milky Way. I identify as the Milky Way. So yes, so that's each of these things would be a thicker and thicker branch, and then the trunk, I guess, is like the universe, right, or God, or whatever you want to call it. Reality, infinity, truth, being, stuff, Corin Gliknok, whatever. So yeah, and they're like, oh, okay, I'm like a little branch on this tree. So if I hurt the other branches, like I'm the branch, but I'm also the tree. So if I hurt these other branches, like I just screw people over, thinking that it's helping me be happy, actually I'm hurting myself. Like if I chop off or poison the other branches on this tree, then yeah, as the branch, I might be feeling good, but as the tree, I'm screwing myself. So, okay. So once you get this expanded awareness of who you are, then selfishness naturally requires love, And so it's like the circle, at the end of all our journeyings, we'll return to where we began and know it for the first time, so kind of coming full circle, or kind of full spiral, kind of at a higher dimension in a way, but in a way you're coming back to where you started. And yeah, so I think basically, if we were really fully aware, then we would understand that being a good person, you could do that out of love. But even if you're like, no, I want to be selfish, that's what I'm here. I'm just going to be selfish. You can't stop me. Okay, well, if you think it through properly, that it ends in the same thing. You should be loving, because that's the way you're going to be happiest. Because you're just taking care of your full self, which is the whole universe. But also, even as the little branch, there is no little branches which are happier than the sages who embody wisdom and love. And, they say ignorance is bliss, but the wakeful don't say ignorance is bliss. That's the sleepwalkers. And what do they know about bliss, Um, so yeah, like bliss is, I've had moments of bliss, you know, and it comes from like a radical surrender to like what is, and be like, let it be. And then you kind of, you have this ego death thing, and yet you're still there. Oh, so something kind of died, gets reborn, don't worry. Or worry, maybe, as the case may be. But like, oh, like I, in my core essence, didn't disappear. So, oh, I was something different to what I thought. Interesting. But anyway, so I think, you know, a deal with the devil, it's kind of like, and that's kind of what self-deception is, I think. Um, it's kind of like this deal which you don't, you think you're coming out on top, but you're not. And you're motivated by, I don't know, I guess, yeah, you're trying to, perhaps, yeah, it's like you're self-serving, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you identify as the whole universe, then love is self-serving. Um, but it's like you, I guess it ultimately it just shows that you don't know who you are if you're making a deal with the devil. Um, and ultimately the devil is also who we are. It's part of, we're, you know, light and dark is part of the universe. So, but so that maybe that, so then the segue into like the whole religion thing of people who say, you know, like, oh yeah, I'm a Satanist, or like, oh, I read the Satanic Bible or whatever. Yeah, how cool. And I don't know, I haven't read any of this stuff, but, and you know, a friend of mine was saying like, oh yeah, if people want to do that, you know, what's the big deal? That's their thing, you know. And he had a little twinkle in his eye, kind of like, yeah. And I kind of felt like he was thinking I was being kind of ideological, or had blinders on, or was being kind of, you know, closed-minded about it, you know, and dogmatic. But I think like, yeah, if you want to be Buddhist or like Hindu or, you know, Muslim or Christian or whatever, or some philosophy, you know, whatever you want, or atheist or agnostic, then that's all good. I think though, you know, that you should, and to some extent you must, live ethically, live by the natural law of love. I would say you should, because, you know, like we just talked about, for those reasons. That's why, whether for, you know, you want to help people or whether you want to help yourself, both roads lead to love if you think it through properly. So that's the should. But then the must, I think, kind of comes from, you know, on another level, you could say, oh, it's your choice, whatever you want to do. And, you know, if you don't want to, if you haven't thought it through properly and you want to be, you know, exploiting others, or kind of, you know, not meeting your duties to others and just focusing on yourself, oh, it doesn't matter, other people, I'm not going to support them or think about them, then I guess, you know, you're entitled to do that. But you are going to hurt yourself and others. But, you know, like, hey, you can do that. And then that's actually necessary for, you know, creating the, catalyzing the drama that helps us learn and makes life so interesting. So that's all fine. And over time, people, just more and more people seem to kind of like osmosis start to drift towards, you know, the light and go, oh, I see what's going on. Like, this is just makes sense. But it takes suffering for you to get there, because most people don't seek out they rather seek out pleasure than truth, or you know, entertainment than truth, or whatever. And so it's almost like it takes, when suffering to ramp up, for most people at least. And say for me, I think it was the case where, yeah, you have to like suffer really deeply to really be like, okay, I just need to stop this suffering, just for pleasure reasons, you know, like I need to get rid of this suffering. And then if it's serious enough, through, you know, blessings disguised as curses, you know, fierce grace, then you will kind of be forced to go deep enough to go, oh, it's the mind. And then you wake up and you start to, well, you know, you fall asleep again regularly, but hey, that's the cycle. And you can start getting more aware, more awake spiritually. And then, you know, I think that's a much more interesting game and experience than being asleep. And, you know, love is objectively, I think, more beautiful and more enjoyable and more creative than, you know, the limited egoic perspective. But both of them have their place, you know, and love embraces all, I suppose. Whereas ego pushes away and tries to control and refuses. And yeah, tries to rule. But so, yeah, in some way, I guess, if with the devil worshipping stuff, if people want to have that as their religion, like they're trying to codify that, like, yeah, I just believe in domination. As far as I understand it, it's about like kind of power and, the beast and, just do what you want, and control and, just admit that we're animals, and, yeah, that's all fine, I think. But I think for pure selfishness reasons, it's an unintelligent strategy. It's not going to get you the results very well. And also it's going to cause a lot of suffering. And we can get all intellectual and abstract about suffering, but hey, what does it really matter? Everything's, meaningless. Ultimately, it's all going to get melted into the sun, right? But leave you on a cliffhanger while I open these blinds to increase the light. Sorry, devil. So, where were we now? So, cliffhanger. Yeah, you could say like, oh, it doesn't matter. I'm just gonna, do, have my religion where I, just want to control or whatever, and worship the devil, or even if you don't literally believe in the devil, just the idea of that. But oh yeah, right, suffering. So apart from it, like, well, if you want to actually have real power and real control, you need to surrender to what you can't control, and then that gives you total power over the things you can control. If you try to control things you can't control, you're going to get stuck and twisted, and you're going to have less resources, possibly no resources, to control the things you could be controlling. So that's like Stoicism, Epictetus and all of that, Marcus Aurelius and whatnot. So, or Seneca, be, know what you can, may I have the courage to change the things I can. No, maybe I may have the serenity to accept the thing. Yeah, may I have the courage to change the things I can, the serenity to accept the things I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. And so, yeah, so that's one thing. Like real power comes from, like The Power of Now, my all-time favorite book by Eckhart Tolle. And so real power and real strength comes from not being afraid of, the world, or trying to, control, and feeling like you're this little thing, but it comes from, being able to be in balance, and you can be very vigilant and assertive when you need to be, but also being very feminine and receptive and passive, and like, oh, this is the way the universe is, and this is what the truth is, and I'll go with that. And, kind of surrendering to love, basically, and surrendering to God, ultimately. Like, you could call it universe if you want, or whatever, but I think the universe is alive, though, so I've started calling it God more, as I've gotten older. Or God is calling himself or itself or whatever, or herself, God through me, you could say. But it's kind of like I'm a wave and I'm also the ocean. So right now I experience myself as a wave, but there's no wave that's not part of the ocean. So there's no human who's not God, yeah, like the one in the all and the all in the one. And so, yeah, if you really want to follow the tenets of, the Satanic Bible or whatever, as far as I understand it, although, like I say, I haven't read it, just heard people talk about it, it seems like actually love is the real way to do that, and spiritual awakening. But anyway, the suffering thing, people, like, we could get all abstract about it, but, like there's more people in slavery right now on Earth. Right now, there's more people currently in slavery than ever were enslaved during the whole history of the Atlantic slave trade, which I think was 300 years or something long. Was it 300 or 150? Not sure. I would say 300. I'm not sure. But so then, like that is a fact. You could look that up. And there's enormous amounts of human trafficking going on. And a lot of this slavery is children. A lot of the slavery is for like labor, like for, you know, slavery, the traditional thing for slavery. But then there's also organ harvesting and sex, you know, sex slavery. And so, yeah, that's, how does that fit into an argument of like, oh, yeah, you know, it's just my right to, you know, whatever, we all have our religions. I just want to, you know, pursue the darkness, you know, that's my thing. It's like, yeah, but I don't know, don't you want to kind of turn the scale slightly a few grams towards the light? I don't know, up to you. So I think there's a lot of things going in the world where small little ripple effects and butterfly effects could do some great stuff. And it'd be beautiful to live in a world where that kind of gnarly stuff isn't happening. And I think, you know, yeah, darkness is interesting, but the most interesting thing is kind of dealing with it. But I think it's the most interesting thing really is the light and the creativity and the color of life. And, you know, and a lot of that is, yeah, granted, it's kind of like the lotus growing out of the shit or the dirt, you know. What's it? No mud, no lotus, something like that. But nonetheless, the lotus is better than the mud. And so I think like Satanism seems to be saying, yeah, the mud's at least as good as the lotus. And it's like, yeah, I wouldn't agree. So, all right. And then some people believe the devil's actually real and they, you know, worship that. I think that's kind of, again, kind of similar thing. Like, okay, well, I don't know. Seems like a bit nuts for the same reasons. But again, if people want to do it, then maybe that's the experience they need to learn. And then maybe that's the experience, you know, they're doing that and then that's going to teach everyone else. And so I think love and the light, you know, and the light can encompass truth, like awareness, but also love and kindness and also kind of emptiness and kind of relaxation, you know. So the light kind of embraces everything and doesn't discriminate. And so I think but the subtlety though is to say, yeah, the universe is perfect. This isn't a glitch or a mistake that there's people being Satanists. However, no, it doesn't make sense. And they will realize it sooner or later. And yeah, we should encourage people to not do that. You can embrace, I can encourage you to do something, but still not judge you if you don't do it. You know, I can be, I'm not going to judge you, but you should do this from my point of view. So yeah, and then the whole thing of like elites, like seemingly, you know, being evidence or whatever for this kind of stuff. Like, for one thing, it's like, look, we don't know what's going on. There's so many things in history where it looks like this and then it turns out more evidence comes out and it was something else going on. And often there's many things going on together, like the Iraq War, that, you know, it's for oil, right? They're getting oil. But then there's also Saddam Hussein was going to start trading oil in the euro, I think. So it's kind of like a currency thing, the US dollar. They were like, hey, this is our cost of living. You know, we can just print dollars and pay for stuff. And everyone else has to use the dollars. So that boosts the value of our currency. So it's really cheap to buy stuff from abroad. And so, you know, it makes it easier for us to just have a higher standard of living. And why is everyone using the dollar? Well, it's no longer because it's backed by gold, which was the original reason. But because, you know, when US government was like, ooh, they're calling in, people are seeing how much we're spending, and their foreign governments especially were calling in their gold, saying they're redeeming their dollars for gold. And the US was like, we're going to go bankrupt. We can't do this. So they're like, okay, they took it off the gold standard, which is crazy, a crazy betrayal of trust there. But Nixon did, I think, in 1971, was it? And anyway, so now the reason people use the dollar is because, you know, Saudi Arabia and I think basically, yeah, there's kind of like a cartel of oil, you know, producing countries, which is that OPEC? I'm not sure. Which you know, refuse to trade in any other currency. Possibly going to change very soon. With the whole BRICS thing coming out saying they want to bring in a gold-backed currency. Probably seeing that America looks overextended right now, and so they're trying to, you know, take the opportunity to shift things geopolitically around the world. But yeah. So anyway, back to the devil. But the devil is in the details, you know. So say Iraq is like, it's also like kind of like a geopolitical currency kind of thing. not just oil and, companies wanting oil and capitalist greed. And then also, capitalist greed, like Dick Cheney being former CEO of Halliburton, and then awards a no bid $1 billion or $1 trillion contract or something. I think billions dollar contract to Halliburton to rebuild all the bridges and everything. But then there's also the thing of all these people who genuinely believed, like, oh yeah, spreading democracy around the world, and they had their ideology. That also seems to be a real thing that was going on. So, I think there's various reasons why things happen, and they can come together, and you might just notice one reason first, but there could be like 3 or 10 reasons that kind of came together in a snowball effect. So say certain things we see, and then there's also just, stuff being wrong, like, oh, it wasn't what I thought, I used to think socialism was the way to, kind of solve the economic question of the world. And then now I think actually, a mild version of socialism can be okay, and it's definitely better than an extreme version like communism or fascism. And, certain versions of, like it could be like an all right system, and in Scandinavia it seems to work okay, although they're not actually that socialist, and they did better when they were less socialist, it seems, and it seems like Sweden is apparently returning to being less socialist, because they had better results before. But nonetheless, my point of view now is like capitalism, free market capitalism is the way, So in my own life, and I'm sure you can relate to this, like your opinions have changed, right? So point being, with the stuff about like, are there powerful elites on this planet who are engaged in, and we're not saying all of them, but like, a significant number of very wealthy, very politically connected people, or even, not so politically connected, but just wealthy or whatever, some, powerful people in society who are engaged in satanic rituals, but have enough, I guess you'd have to say politically connected, they have enough political influence to kind of fly under the radar one way or another. So I don't know, who knows, like, but I think it's possible. I mean, you look at, say, Jeffrey Epstein stuff, like, and he had his island, and then there's all these underage girls, people going there for sex, and, all these really powerful people going there to the island, like Bill Clinton going there like 20 times, and it's like, okay, and then, there's people claiming, that Epstein was a Mossad agent, and it was like a control blackmail operation, to get people doing things they shouldn't be doing, and then have it recorded, unbeknownst to them, and then, now you can do whatever you want, but just these 10% of the things which I think you're interested in doing, you can't do them. They're off the table now. But all the other stuff, you're a free agent, enjoy. But just, hey, this is our stuff. This 10%, that's in our field of a sphere of influence. You stay away from that, or else we'll show these videos, or, So seemingly there's something like that going on. And, they were trafficking people, sex trafficking. And, Ghislaine Maxwell goes to prison for sex trafficking. And yet the judge orders that the list of her clients be sealed and remain secret. Why? These people were paying for sex from trafficked people. Why aren't they going on trial? Like, who are these people? We don't know. That's kind of weird. That's an anomaly, right? That's worth pointing out. Like, oh, okay. 1 point to people who think there's some sort of crazy nefarious. Now, that's just saying nefarious stuff at large. That doesn't mean Satanists, right? But then there's all these stories of, like I mentioned before, there have been allegations of like institutionalized Satanism, like, around the world. And this, I can't remember the names of specific things, but if you look it up, you can dig and, see what you think. But, so, but I would say, and like the whole Jimmy Savile thing at the BBC, doing, you could say devilish things, or, kind of really evil things, like, raping children and stuff. And people knew about it for decades. Same with the Catholic Church in Ireland. Everyone knew about it for a long time, but it just kept going on and on. And the Magdalene laundries here, where they found mass graves, where there was, women, if they were considered too promiscuous, or if they were prostitutes, or if they were just pregnant out of wedlock, often, they would be put in these laundries, which are very, lucrative business for, the church, and for, I think the government got a cut, I think. But it was kind of like an extrajudicial prison system for the government. They would just put people there. And a lot of them died, and there's horrific things going on. They're just, and we found mass graves of them. And, so much, sexual abuse of children, all kinds of crazy stuff. Like that Pope Benedict or whatever, moving around, some priest who had molested 100, I think, 100, or was it more, blind boys. And the Pope knew this guy was doing that, and he moved him to a different place, and then he molested more people. And so there's all that kind of stuff. You could say, oh, no one's perfect. But it's like, well, okay, we do know what we've established so far is there, in a very lazy way, is that, there's a bunch of really crazy, like, atrocious criminal activity going on, which seemingly goes unpunished. And and I've heard Jordan Peterson say as an example of mass psychosis, the claims of satanic ritual abuse. But then I wonder if he's looked into that. Like, I know, say, his view of certain things, other things I would disagree with. Like, he seems a little too trusting of the pharmaceutical industry, for example. Or, whereas Kelly Brogan or someone, Dr. Kelly Brogan, would say, psychiatric medication is actually nowhere near as scientifically based as you would think. And then she says, long term, they're not, they don't help at all. They're no more helpful than exercise, and they have a bunch of, negative side effects. That's her point of view. I don't know if she's right. Whereas Jordan would say, I think, they have a role to play, whatever. But that's not really to the point. But this is the devil misleading me, sending me off topic. But he cited that as, I was like, okay, well, is that right? So maybe it's true. I don't know. Maybe he's looked into it, and actually all these things were like this teenage girl who's looking into the camera, really seemingly very aware and focused and not out of it, very clear-minded, and kind of just matter of fact about saying how, she was involved through her whole childhood, and she was told never to talk about it, and that was just part of her operating system. She was like, yeah, we don't talk about that. Is these black mass things where she would go and, be involved in crazy stuff. There's, bring in some homeless guy who's, laughing his head off like he's on drugs or something, and then they start splitting, with a huge knife, cutting him down from the top to bottom, just, tearing his chest open and drinking his blood and getting adrenochrome, allegedly. Apparently the adrenaline in the blood creates this crazy drug. You may have heard this in some of these kind of people talking about like QAnon kind of theories or whatever, this kind of stuff. But yeah, maybe what she was saying, even though she looked very like believable, maybe someone like Jordan's looked into it and actually know that, that actually is psychosis. There was no fact, maybe there's some way to know that, I don't know. Or maybe that's an assumption that he's making there, and maybe actually there is a lot of evidence to this, and it's a real thing. I don't know. But it's not very nice to think about that this could be happening. But I do think for sure we know a lot of power structures are not serving the public interest. If you look at the whole COVID thing, anyone who's really paying attention, it's like this was mass psychosis mixed in with mass kind of callous profiteering, mixed in with authoritarian political maneuvering and manipulating the public and gaslighting the public, psychological operations against the citizenry, and trying to bring in a more centralized control, which is what governments have done through time. But it's at the point where the technology is so advanced that it's kind of crossing this really crazy line where it's always unpleasant to lose control and freedom over your life, but it's getting to a point where it's not like all shifts. If you're walking towards a cliff, the first meter, okay, you're closer to the cliff. The second meter, you're a meter closer to the cliff. It's kind of the same thing. But as you start getting closer, each meter closer begins to get increasingly in need of resistance. Like, no, hey, we're not walking any closer to that cliff. That's just a metaphor, but I think, that has happened. So we know that, and so therefore it seems the whole thing, the idea that there could be like, organized Satanism going on, I wouldn't rule that out. I mean, but also I think, you don't want to be jumping into this thing of assuming it's true. I mean, unless you've done enough research, and I haven't done enough research, because if I research that, there's opportunity cost, there's other things I want to learn. And I don't know, I kind of feel like ultimately we're all together in this, we're all branches on the same tree. And I don't think I need to go into that much detail. I think I can just say, yeah, it might be true, it might not, but right now in my life, it's not relevant for action, and I'm here to be of service and to have a good time while I'm being of service. And so I'll just leave that as a mystery, and I'm just going to be good and do my best to just uplift my little corner of the garden. And if my responsibilities expand, then maybe I'll need to look into that more, as if it enters into my realm of power and ability to do something about it. But yeah, so anyway, then leading us up to what the devil actually existing. So there's some possibilities. Rick Strassman, his studies on DMT, he wrote the book DMT, The Spirit Molecule. So Dr. Rick Strassman, at the University of New Mexico in the 1990s, he was the first scientist to start studying psychedelics again since the, Controlled Substances Act in like 1970, I think, where the Nixon administration, another crazy thing they did was put a blanket, ban on mind-altering drugs, except for the ones that don't make you question the government, like alcohol, cigarettes, tobacco, coffee or whatever, pharmaceutical, medications. But, so psychedelic, LSD, mushrooms, DMT, marijuana, all these things were illegal. I guess marijuana was already illegal at that point. But anyway, so Rick Strassman, in his studies, he was finding, there's benefits for, kind of self-awareness and dealing with addiction and stuff. But at really high doses of DMT, this psychedelic compound, this molecule, he found that, which is produced naturally in the human body, by the way, seemingly at moments of great, maybe at birth and death, and maybe peak moments of, I don't know, who knows what, but maybe dreaming as well. It seems probably dreaming. Anyway, he found when he gave all these people who weren't talking to each other, scientific experiment, he didn't want them talking to each other and meeting each other, because then that could, confound the results. They could start reporting the same thing. They, like, almost all of them, if not all of them, reported meeting intelligent entities in this other dimension, which they said was realer than real. They were like I'm telling you, this is realer than normal life. Like, this is the dream. I think that was the real thing. So that's he was like, oh, that's very weird. How do I explain this? And they're actually now in, I think, Imperial College London. They're studying DMT at last, not for like therapeutic benefits, but just for like kind of ontological or metaphysical understanding of like mapping out the nature of reality. Like, let's just get scientific data, whatever, on this, and just see what do we know about this space, this other dimension? Is it just an illusion, or is it real? Who knows? We'll talk about that later. Let's just get the data in, and the details, and then we can start to figure out, make some hypotheses, what's going on, and verify that, check the hypotheses we already have about how things work. And so that's very interesting. But, they would encounter like kind of very benevolent beings, but also some very dark beings, and like reptilian beings. And one of the guys was raped by these kind of crocodile beings, and he was just like traumatized, and he was this hippie guy with long hair, and he like, cut his hair and like, just stopped taking drugs and was like, moving on from that. So, like, if those sorts, and then by the way, the phenomenology of this thing is very similar to the phenomenology of UFO encounters and meetings with fairies and spirits, and all this kind of stuff throughout history, elves, angels, and that kind of thing. And so, and it seems Graham Hancock makes a very persuasive case. You could look up a lecture on this, Aliens, Elves, and Ayahuasca, I think is the lecture title, on YouTube or whatever, where he's kind of talking about making the case that it's the same phenomenon, but being experienced through different cultural lenses. So our current technological culture sees it as UFOs. In Europe, they saw it as fairies. In Japan or whatever, maybe it's spirits. And there are accounts of this like throughout history, throughout time and space. It's not a recent thing. And it seems to match very closely onto the DMT thing. So that's very weird. Like, how does that make any sense? Why wouldn't it be, and you'd have to look into it, but it's quite specific, the similarities. So that's something. And then it could make you wonder, okay, well, if that is the case, that there are these beings in other dimensions all around us, and then if there are kind of more loving ones and then less loving ones, more selfish kind of ones, then what's the balance of power between them in terms of their influence on us, and what influence they have, and then what's the balance of power within that field of influence, and is it possible that one dark kind of entity is more dominant than the others? And is that what we were calling the devil, And maybe there is some kind of thing. And then maybe certain elites are like, tuning in and connecting to that entity and downloading, some sort of information from, to their consciousness and gaining some sort of advantage, whether it's like a real practical advantage of, like people go take ayahuasca and they feel like, oh, I just had all these downloads. Like I just understood things much more clearly than I can ever normally do it. And people say this, or everyone says this basically. This is the really, and with psychedelics in general, it feels like what Aldous Huxley called the doors of perception. Well, actually William Blake called the doors of perception being cleansed, or Huxley called kind of the reducing valve of human consciousness kind of opening. Like for practical survival purposes, we can't be seeing angels all the time, but then maybe certain substances or certain conditions can maybe do a bunch of Kundalini yoga or something even. And it can open up your mind and you can see these things. But that the idea that these, what was I saying here? So that the devil could be this powerful entity ruling the others in this space. Was I making another point? Let's drink some water. Maybe the water will help. The angel is in the water. God is in the water. That can be the song. I'll play in a moment to close this. But so we're saying the reducing valve, open up and you see, so perhaps the elites are kind of actually downloading kind of some information, or like it's giving them certain habits or certain emotional strength or something to do what they want to do. These particular elites who are, if they are there, hypothetical dark elites involved in this stuff, and perhaps these entities are like they feed off of dark energy and they resonate with fear and terror or like anger or these kind of lower vibrational things. And so maybe they're like, hey, go kill a bunch of, people or whatever for us, and then we'll be waiting there to lap up the negative vibrations from these terrified people as you kill them. Maybe that's like their thing, and they're like, hey, we need to eat. That's what we're doing. Just like we can kill a cow and people go, hey, that's not right. Well, I need to eat. Maybe that's what they think, like, hey, you're an immortal soul anyway, whatever. You're God. Where are you going? Nowhere. We're going to kill you, and then we're going to get the vibrations, and that's how it's going to go. Maybe that's what they're doing. And then also it could be a kind of like a spiritual, quote unquote, thing or like a cultural thing of like just, certain elites doing that together and are giving them a certain cohesion and team spirit and sense of collective purpose, which could help guide whatever nefarious stuff they might be up to, or even just whatever they're doing just in their private lives kind of being dark, not necessarily in an organized political way, although recent years would make you wonder if, there wasn't some sort of dark, kind of satanic-esque cult or cults, Skull and Bones, what are they doing, for example? Like, what are these cults up to? We know they're there. There are these secretive elite cults. A bunch of presidents have been in Skull and Bones, the Bushes and etc. And it seems, is it a coincidence that both Bushes launched all these wars and, Bush seniors, supporting people who are killing nuns in El Salvador or whatever, and then, Bush Jr. million people die in Iraq and all this crazy stuff, you know. So coincidence that, you know, they're part of some secret society, and maybe that society's not doing anything wrong, you know, who knows? But it would make you wonder. There's definitely a lot of secrecy around the more upper echelons of society globally, and there's a lot of terrible things happening, and there's a lot of things that seem to suggest there's a bit of coordination going on. The COVID thing, you know, everyone reading from the same playbook, which is, you know, there's evidence actually, according to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., that the CIA, like complete evidence, apparently, I haven't looked into the details. He says that, I think he does cite where you can look this up, but like if you look up him saying this, you might find that. But that it was actually the kind of the whole COVID thing or pandemic thing was kind of an intelligence operation. Like the CIA was running simulations of that for decades before this, and then the actual thing of implementing, like say Operation Warp Speed, the vaccine development thing, was actually being run by the NSA, I think, ultimately. And when they were presenting, I think according to him, like when they presented their things to FDA to get, like, you know, approval, they had to, the files showed who was running it, and the people were surprised, like, what, the NSA is running this? I thought it was, and it seemed like it was actually the military contractors making these things, and then the pharmaceutical corporations were putting their stamp on it and just getting paid for it, allegedly. But anyway, that's just a little example. What's the relevance? The relevance is, you know, these certain things which happen, which would make you wonder, like, is there's some sort of coordinated thing globally, you know, which could explain, you know, powerful, or even, you know, much of the world. So I think, you know, if people think, oh yeah, the devil, you know, there's like Satanists running the world, I used to think, yeah, that's insane. But now I think, like, yeah, I don't know. But yeah, you might be right, you know. And then aliens. Is the devil some like lizard man, lizard folk coming here to take our jobs? Yes. No, I don't know. Yeah, then, I mean, again, like, you know, it's not, I think John Mack, Passport to the Cosmos, this Harvard psychologist who studied alien abduction, abductees, or experiences, he called them, because it wasn't clear, I think, how was it, like a mental thing or a physical thing or some combination, like what was going on? Is it like some blending of dimensions? What's going on there? A lot of these things seem to take place when people are in their beds, these abductions, quote unquote abductions, and then a lot of the time they would go to a place. Sometimes it seemed like a spaceship, but other times it would seem like, you know, a cave or just like a room somewhere. And so, you know, a lot of the time it was benevolent, the people talking to these beings. Other times not so benevolent. And again, almost identical to the DMT research of Rick Strassman, which is kind of strange, and traditional folklore of elves, etc., as we mentioned. So yeah, is it possible there's some lizard man with a big crown running the planet, or trying to run the planet? I think that's possible, and I don't know, but I'm not shy to be like, I'm admitting my ignorance. Like, I don't know, but I think it's possible. But you know, hopefully it's not possible. Hopefully, whatever way it is, we'll be fine. The truth triumphs. Well, the truth is triumph. So it's already done. It's just so yeah. But then at the end of the day, you know, whatever runs the planet, or whatever runs, you know, a country, or whatever runs yourself and myself, I think ultimately it is the universe, and everything is one, all is one, and we're all just trying to do our best. We're all trying to better ourselves and the world. Yeah, interesting. Even if you think like, oh, I'm not bettering the world, I'm just bettering myself. You could say, what does the world mean? You know, your world, the world you live in, you're trying to improve, you know? And so the universe, from your point of view, you think the universe will be a better place. The best place the universe can be is if I take care of myself. That's the selfish kind of impulse. And so it's still like an ethic of betterment, you know? So I think ultimately we're all just sweethearts trying to do our best, even if we're doing crazy, heinous stuff. And we all, and even if you think you're intentionally trying to, make things worse, then ultimately that is still because you think it's good to make things worse. You think it's going to be better if it's worse, right? So I think some of us are more awake than others, and we've all got room to grow. God knows I have a lot of room to grow, and it's cool, it's fun, and we are where we are, and I think it's about a much better thing than believing in some sort of Luciferian or satanic or dark kind of thing of like, oh, it's so exciting and empowering. The real empowerment and the real excitement is love. And I think, we're all going to die, and seemingly probably we're all going to be reborn. That's how it seems. I don't know in what way, but, and I think, right now is the most important moment of our lives. It always is. And so what do we do now? Like, I don't know, but I think everyone will do what's right for them. But I do think objectively, the light is more beautiful than the dark. The light has color. The light's more colorful than the dark. And we'll leave it there. Little song, take us out. What is it? God's in the water. God's in my hair, he doesn't seem to care. God's in the everywhere. And God's in my eyes, I don't know why. He doesn't seem to mind, but he's everywhere. And God's in my feet, God's in my knees, and ain't it sweet that God's there in my nose, in the nostril hairs. Oh, God's in my ear, God's everywhere, he's there and here. God's in my tongue, God's in the drinking and the swishing of the water. Oh, God's in the water, and God's in the waters of truth. Amen. Happy present moment, everybody.